All right, so I have gone in and muted everybody. So Ben, when I throw it to you, you'll just have to unmute here. But I'm super excited to be partnering with Ben this year. I'm really excited about this call. We have no agenda today other than to talk all things AI and what's going on in advisors' worlds and how AI can help with efficiency. And if I told you in just a couple of years that you could literally triple your hourly rate, become a 100% referral only planning practice, and at the same time, reduce the number of hours that you're working by half or by two-thirds, most people would think that sounds completely crazy. And there was this time when I thought that those things couldn't coexist. And what I've learned over the last 2 decades is that it's not only possible, but it's actually really attainable for any advisor at any level, serving any geographic area, serving any demographic of client in any type of business or compensation structure. So it's completely attainable for anybody. And let me explain. So I want to take you back to 2008. So 2008 as an advisor for me was a very scary year. And most people, when I ask that question, they're like, what was scary about 2008? Most people jump to assumption that it was the market dropping by like 5 million% and clients freaking out and all of the things. Something way scarier happened for me that year. I found out I was pregnant. So this was great news because my husband and I had really wanted a baby, but this was scary for me because for those previous 4 years, I had been working around the clock like a crazy woman. Nights, weekends, right? A client wanted to meet Saturday at 10 a.m. I was there. I was your girl. And that might sound familiar to some of you. And I just remember thinking, like, there's no way that I can work like this and be the mom that I really wanted to be, right? I didn't want to be tethered to my phone at soccer games and constantly playing catch up on nights and weekends. And I had this moment where I realized, like, okay, I was also really cool with the amount of money that I was making. And I didn't really want to sacrifice the vision or success that I had for my practice. But I also knew that I had to change the way that I was doing things. I literally needed to cut the number of hours I was working in half, if not more, and maintain the same level of revenue, right? A totally sane approach to business. I remember my husband at the time looking at me and like thinking like crazy pregnant lady coming in hot. But what I realized in that moment is that I hadn't really built a business. I just had a very busy Libby. So I set out on this mission to cut my hours and figure out the back end of the business and have a real business with strategy and systems and processes and all of the things that a real business owner had, right? When I started my business, I remember thinking like, oh, owning your business is going to be so cool. You can sleep till noon and work till 3 a.m. if you want to. And that's what being an entrepreneur is all about. And I remember very distinctly that inflection point of realizing like, oh crap, I actually own a business and I need to step out of my role as an advisor and really into my role as CEO. And in just a few short years since that first pregnancy, everything changed. We quadrupled the amount of money that we were making per hour. So our revenue per hour went up 4 times. We became that 100% referral only planning practice because we built systems and processes rooted in creating a remarkable client experience. And I cut my hours down to 24 hours a week. So for me, the crazy part wasn't that I was working 24 hours or working 3 days a week. I was actually turning away clients that had a checkbook and a heartbeat. If you would have told 2004 Libby that she would be saying no to clients who could fog a mirror, I would have thought you were completely crazy. And every time I'm out at a conference speaking or I'm talking with advisors and I'm sharing this story, I always hear, but I don't want to work part-time. And before you come at me with the I love my job, I don't want to work part-time, that's fine. You do you, boo-boo. You work all the hours you want. But I'm encouraging you to look at this conversation that we're having through the lens of that revenue per hour. That if you're going to be putting in the time, can we make it significantly more profitable? Are we actually becoming better, faster, working smarter, not harder? Are we able to do things cheaper and easier? And AI is like, I mean, it's funny because when I talk about starting my business back in 2004, I now feel like, like that grandma that's like, well, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow and we didn't have note taker AIs. I had to do it with this crazy contraption called a pen. And like, there is no better time to be a financial advisor than right now. So, when I look at, okay, well, what did I change over those couple of years? It was building a really simple client service model, building out systems and processes that are rooted in client experience. It was building a simple team with the right people in the right roles, with the right vision and the right culture. And it was building out things that saved time. So templates, all these time-saving techniques that we talk about at the Efficient Advisor. So, how do we make our business more efficient? How do we make it more effective? And most importantly, how do we make it more enjoyable?
Excited to do it here.
And basically, I'm gonna go ahead and mute. And basically what I'm looking at now for advisors is like, wow, it is crazy to see how much has changed over the last 20 years. And AI is completely changing the game. I know it has already for me in my business. And I mean, with agents coming out this year, like whoa. And it's funny because when I look at how AI can play a role, right? We're talking higher profit margins. We're talking less human error. We're talking more automations, more delegations, all of these things that lead you to be, exceptionally more efficient, exceptionally more effective. And I don't know about you, but having a more profitable business with less errors to me is certainly more, certainly more enjoyable. And that's really why I've partnered with Ben. So we were introduced by a mutual friend of ours probably over a year or so ago now, Ben, right? And, my mission is to help financial advisors create systems and processes so that they can deliver a remarkable experience. And I was learning a little bit about what Ben was doing with a friend of mine and how he was helping her build these automations and things that I didn't even know existed, right? At this time, I was thinking Chat GPT or Open AI was really for marketing. And I was using it for things like crafting a marketing message or helping me create a social media calendar and really just scratching the surface. And from the first conversation that Ben and I had, I just remember being like, wait, what? No, almost like scary, right? So to the point where my 15-year-old and I sat down and started watching Terminator so that I could be fully prepared for Judgment Day when it came and Skynet, did the whole thing and all this stuff. So I mean, I was literally like blown away. And so wanted to start looking at, well, how can advisors, like, do they even know that this is what it's capable of? How do we tell them that without scaring the crap out of them? But how do we let them know how we can integrate that into our daily practice, even if we're with a broker dealer? So Ben does, so for those of you that are in the group coaching program, you recognize Ben. He did a module for us on ChatGPT, and it is consistently always listed as one of our advisors' favorite modules, right? They listen to the 45 minutes and they're just like, I didn't even know that that was all of the things. And of course, AI is changing and evolving so quickly. Ben's having to update that module already because ChatGPT has changed so much over the course of a year. So I was sharing with advisors, different ways that we could use it. Ben's video like really opened the floodgates on how we can use ChatGPT from everything from creating investment policy statements. How can we use AI to delegate, automate, to create reminders? How can we get our tech to talk? And something I see a lot with advisors is tech stack jumping. So I don't know about you, but I remember always working off of minimum viable product when it came to my tech. Like, what's the least thing I need? What's the least I need to know about Money Guide Pro in order to be able to create a deliverable for my client, right? And then like someday I'll go back and learn the rest of it. And same thing with Salesforce and same thing with our tax planning software. Like, what's the minimum that I need to know? And then I'd see all this other tech out there from other advisors going, oh, but that one does that. And oh gosh, that sounds so much more interesting. And I'm encouraging you guys to think about your tech and become like a student of the tech that you already have, because there's so much changing and so much evolving that often you can get more out of the tech that you have without making those massive adjustments. And every time we switch tech companies, right, it comes along with significant amounts of process change. And while I love coaching you guys, I don't want you to redo the program every year because you're constantly switching programs and needing to blow up and redo everything that we built. So one of the things that's really appealing to me about what Ben does is Ben can step into an advisor's world and look at all of the different tech stack that you currently have and help you make it all start to communicate. So I want to kind of just set the stage for the conversation that there is a strong chance that what you have is great, or if it's just fine. So there's a huge difference between like, is this a deal breaker when it comes to tech, or is this just annoying? And then someone like Ben can actually come in and help you figure out some of those little annoying nuances and let your tech talk to each other. And to me, I'm always just like, that's crazy. One of the ways that I just started using ChatGPT that I just wanted to share really quickly before I let Ben take over is for building out standard operating procedures. So we have in our office just started taking a Zoom video and walking through and verbalizing and screen sharing a process as we're doing it. And I can then hop on Zoom, screen record, talk my way through it, take the transcript and the video, send it to my VA, who then can run it through ChatGPT with a really good prompt, asking it to pull from the transcript step-by-step instructions, timestamps, so that we can go into the video and take screenshots to go along with it, right? We can have it, put it all into an Excel document all by itself and create these standard operating procedures. So one of the cool things about OpenAI and some of this tech is that it can take things that we normally as advisors hate doing, are afraid to doing, and make it so easy. And it was funny, I was just on a call and I was showing this advisor how to do some stuff with chat, and she was just like this. So I'm fully prepared. I have my notebook and a pen. I have my note taker in here. I'm going to be doing all of the things. So I'm excited to have Ben. I'm excited to do this. I'm super excited to have you sponsoring the podcast this year. I think 2025 is going to be a phenomenal year for advisors. And I can see now by December of this year, everybody here working so much more efficiently, so much more effectively, and having so much more fun in their business. So thank you for being here. And I'll just let you kind of take it from here. I'm going to mute myself and take notes. And like I said, if you guys have questions along the way, please drop them in the chat and I will be kind of fielding those, and we'll have some time at the end where we can all bug Ben with all the questions that we have.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Libby. I appreciate that. Just like real quick about my background, in case that wasn't enough validation and why you guys should believe me. So I actually started my career as a financial advisor. I was working at an independent RIA here in Chicago, just doing the classic entry level, doing 150 cold calls a day, building out plans for prospects and Money Guide Pro, all that good stuff. And then I went over to Merrill Lynch and I was working on building my own book of business there. And during that time, I'm sure some of you know, it's a very sink or swim environment. You have to be bringing in new clients. I was spending my free time like staying up late at night, watching YouTube videos, learning how to code, which is like a really weird thing for an advisor to be doing. So I decided, to kind of stop living that double life. So I quit my job at Merrill Lynch, and I went to work for a financial technology company here in Chicago. Really just got more comfortable with working with technology, with coding. And then during that time, I actually completed a master's degree in data science, which is kind of the underlying technology behind AI. Fun fact, I did that through the University of Michigan, and it was during COVID, and it was fully remote. So I did the entire degree from my studio apartment in Chicago. So I will hop on the Michigan football bandwagon because I pay tuition, but don't ask me what my favorite bar in Ann Arbor is because I've never stepped foot there. So yeah, interesting times. But right after I graduated from my master's degree, like literally a month after, OpenAI released ChatGPT. And at first I was kind of like, okay, everything I just learned and all these skills I just acquired are like no longer relevant because I just learned how to build machine learning models and chatbots and stuff like that. And then this company called OpenAI was like, okay, well, here's the best chatbot ever. The smartest people in the world spent hundreds of millions of dollars in 10 years building it, and anyone can use it and anyone can build their own software on top of it. So I quickly pivoted into, okay, how can I use my understanding of the RIA and financial advisory space and my understanding of these technologies to actually help businesses implement these things, and kind of get them up and running and make it easy to understand and utilize. So that's when I started my firm about a year ago. And we're going to keep this high level today. I'm going to try not to talk about my business at all. But the reason I do want to mention it is because we are kind of strategic consultants and we build custom solutions for firms. And so we've seen like every single pain point and every single use case across tons of different RAs. And the reason I mention that is because when I talk about AI, I think it really comes from an unbiased perspective. I'm not going to be, I'm not a vendor. I'm not trying to sell you on my own product. I'm not trying to sway you into signing up for something, right? It's really just me kind of, sharing my knowledge from all the firms I've worked with. So with that out of the way, I think, as Libby was saying, I think AI is going to have an absolutely breakout year this year. I think 2025 is going to be the year where you look back and you're like, I either got on board or I was behind the curve. I think we had a lot of adoption in 2024. It accelerated a lot through the end of the year, and it's continuing to accelerate. Not only just the adoption by advisors of AI, but also the technology itself is exponential, right? Like these models are getting much better, much faster than we could have all anticipated. So with that being said, my prediction is that by the end of 2025, the majority of firms are going to be using AI in multiple ways. So clip that, stamp it, come back to me, tell me if I'm wrong. But that's kind of what I think. So again, before we kind of start getting into the use cases and kind of how you guys can start using AI, I do want to just preface this with one kind of big theme, which is, AI is not about replacing that human element for you as an advisor, right? Like we all know how important that human element is in this business. It's a relationship oriented business. And actually kind of quite the opposite. If you use AI the right way, it actually gives you more time and more capacity to deliver more of that human element. So, just a real quick example, we worked with a firm like a couple months ago, and we helped them set up AI to do their end-to-end meeting, their end-to-end meeting processes, right? And they found that was saving them so much time that they decided that their kind of tier three, bottom of the totem pole tier of clients, they wanted to bump them up to 2 meetings per year instead of 1, because they felt like they had that much more capacity because of the time savings, right? And so that's kind of just an example of, the impact it's having. And those clients aren't like, oh no, the firm I'm working with is a bunch of robots, right? Like the AI is kind of working behind the scenes and just empowering those advisors to be more efficient and deliver more of that, human element at scale. So with that, would love to kind of just get into ChatGPT real quick. So if you don't know what ChatGPT is, no offense, but you got to come out from under that rock and try it out. It is a chatbot that is very, very smart. It can do like so many different things. I won't get into kind of like the tech behind it, but kind of just assuming everyone is at least familiar with it. I want to give you guys some advice and some practical tips on how to use it. So the first thing is this kind of concept of prompt engineering. And I hate this term because there's absolutely no engineering involved, and it's just a fancy term. But the idea of this is how do you communicate and speak to the AI model? How do you communicate with ChatGPT? And the reason that this is important is because the more clearly and the better you communicate with an AI model, the better its output is going to be. An example, let's say you want to use ChatGPT to help you draft a newsletter for your clients. A bad prompt would be, help me draft a newsletter for my clients that covers market news from the last month. It's probably going to produce something that is, kind of maybe halfway there, but you're not going to like it, and it's not going to really be something you want to send out. If you instead say, I am a financial advisor, my clients are doctors who are entering retirement. You are a copywriter. I want you to help me draft a monthly newsletter about X, Y, and Z. When you're drafting it, make sure to use an informational tone. Maybe add in, it's kind of ridiculous, but like maybe add in some analogies that would resonate with a doctor, something, I don't know, whatever it is. You'll notice that like that output is so much closer and so much better to what you actually want it to be. And so that kind of concept of getting good at talking to the model is this thing that's called prompt engineering. So I would encourage people, if that's something you want to learn about, just go on YouTube, just type in prompt engineering 101, watch a video, and you will start having much more rich and effective conversations with ChatGPT. An example I always like to give is think of ChatGPT as a fresh college grad who is showing up to work for you on its very first day, and it is really skilled and it's really ambitious and it really wants to help you, but it doesn't know anything about your business and it doesn't know what you want it to do. However you would communicate to that person on their first day is like kind of how you should communicate with ChatGPT. So that's kind of prompting. Definitely would encourage people to kind of look into that and refine your skill sets there. So let's talk use cases. So one thing is, AI is very good at writing. So some obvious use cases are using it to help you write newsletters. You can use it to help you draft emails. Let's say a client emails you and has a very specific question about a new tax law and how that applies to them, right? Like that's a pretty loaded email. You're gonna have to go do some research. You're gonna have to dig through some IRS documentation or whatever it is, and try to distill that down into easy to understand terms for that client. Prime use case for ChatGPT. Just say, hey, here's what this client's asking about. Here's the law that we're thinking about. How should I explain this to them in kind of simple terms, right? So yeah, and that can also extend, writing newsletters, emails, social media posts. How should I be posting things on LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. So writing is a great use case. Another one is brainstorming. So maybe for your firm this year, you really want to focus on marketing and growth, but you don't really have much of a strategy in place. And if that's you, you're not alone, because I hear that from advisors who I talk to all the time. Just fire up ChatGPT and be like, hey, this is who I am. This is my firm. This is my business. Here are my goals. I want to land 10 new households this year. Here's the kind of niche that I'm playing in. Give me a strategy to do that. And it'll start giving you, really good ideas that you can kind of work off of. And so I use it as a brainstorming companion every single day. I do still have friends in real life, but I'm talking to ChatGPT all day long as I'm just thinking through decisions and trying to come up with, ideas for my own business. Another way you can use it, this is a fairly new feature, is ChatGPT has the ability to search the web now. So anytime you are going to Google something and you are going to try to find an article or some piece of information online to answer a question you have, I would say use ChatGPT instead of Google. If you're wondering, hey, how are the markets doing today? Or, what was the outcome of the Fed meeting today? Like rather than Googling, finding a CNBC article, reading it, like ChatGPT will go crawl the internet, grab all that information, and give you like a nice summary. And then from there, you could even ask it follow-up questions like, hey, like, tell me more about that, right? So that's another use case, kind of market research, staying on top of all the news and information that's out there. And then lastly, another one, and this one is something I kind of discovered recently that I think will be helpful for a lot of you guys. And this goes back to what Libby was saying about not getting enough out of your technology, is now that ChatGPT can browse the web, you can tell it to go to the documentation site of the various technologies you're using and give you advice on how to set up your technologies. So let me give you a use case. I meet with advisors all the time who are like, I need to use workflows in my CRM, but I don't know how to set them up. Wealthbox, Redtail, whatever it is. They both have documentation on what are workflows, how to set them up, best practices. That all lives on the internet. Just tell ChatGPT, hey, here's my client service model. Here's what I want to accomplish with workflows. Go to Wealthbox's website, read their documentation on workflows, give me step-by-step instructions on how to set these up, and it will, in 30 seconds, give you a complete plan, a kind of step-by-step guide on like, here's how you should be setting this up in your tech stack. So that's another use case, kind of just, using it to learn more about your technologies and kind of how to get more out of them. So yeah, that's kind of ChatGPT in a nutshell, some ideas for some use cases. Like Libby said, she's got a great, more in-depth course on that I put together. And I'm always posting stuff like this on LinkedIn. So, if you guys have any, want to hear more, please feel free to follow me. I don't know, Libby, do you have any thoughts you want to chime in there? Otherwise, I can just kind of jump into the next section of what I wanted to get into, but I don't want to just sit here and fire off without any gaps.
Yeah. So no, so like I had an advisor the other day who was like, what do I do? I have this client who has a crazy, like they've been following some dude on YouTube, like a gold person on YouTube. And I don't have the time to do the research. I'm like, use ChatGPT. So we plugged in a prompt, right? And asked it like, hey, go check out this crazy guy's YouTube channel. Tell us what his philosophies are. And not only tell us what his philosophies are, but help us build some counter thoughts against what that, like, why are these inaccurate? Or help me build a case study against what he is saying. And it was like, blah, 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 blah. And then it was like, hey, now put that in an email to our client, but use a fun and friendly tone, maybe even add a joke in, to try to make it sound like this guy's not so crazy. And it's unbelievable. One of the questions that came in, Ben, that before we jump to the next session that I think would be helpful would, people were saying about training AI, like, okay, if I'm doing it for newsletters, do I put in past newsletters? Do I train it? Do I give it additional content? Is that helpful?
100%. And if you do like a little research or do one of those like prompting 101 videos, that's one thing that you'll find is a huge best practice for prompting is giving it examples. It learns very well from examples. So yeah, if you're saying, hey, draft a newsletter about XYZ, here's the last one I sent out. And then you tell it, when you're reading the last one I sent out, pick up notes on my tone, and things like that. That's going to go a really long way. So yeah, examples, there's tons of research and studies out there about how examples make outputs significantly better. So yeah, great call out.
Great. All
Cool.
right. Yeah. The only other kind of thing worth mentioning is beyond ChatGPT, Claude, Notebook, any thoughts on those additional? Oh, and then free, or do I need to pay for ChatGPT premiums?
Yeah, so we are kind of reaching a point where the performance of all of these models are converging. There isn't necessarily one that's way better than the other. So yeah, all of these things are kind of applicable, whether you want to use ChatGPT, use Claude, use Google Gemini, DeepSeek, the new one that's kind of causing a lot of chaos right now, which we can get to that later. But yeah, they're all, in my opinion, they're all just as good as the next one. And it's kind of just whatever your preference is. In terms of paying for it, I can't remember off the top of my head. ChatGPT is like $20 a month. If you're not paying that, I think it kind of just limits how many times you can use its best model. And so yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but if it's something you're using every day, which I think most people can and should be doing, I think it's worthwhile.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. All right, let's keep going down your list of goodness.
All right. So next up, very interesting topic. So we have kind of AI for advisor software. So ChatGPT is great, a general purpose tool that you can use, but there are a lot of softwares that are popping up that do things with AI for financial advisors. The big one here is the meeting note taker. There are tons of these. I think there are at least kind of 15 AI note takers built specifically for financial advisors. And this is kind of it's the most obvious and clearly valuable use case is using AI during your meetings. So I think that's why all these startups are focusing on this use case initially right now. And so one of the things I want to kind of just elaborate on is how to pick a note taker. So first and foremost, I think everybody should be using a note taker. I think that's kind of like a table stakes things now. You'll see the value right away. If you're not, give it a try. But when you're looking at meeting note takers, you kind of have these like generic note takers that could be used for, all sorts of people, like a Fireflies, a Fathom, or something like that. And then you also have these AI for advisor note takers, things like a Jump, Zox, FinMate, Vegaminds, all these different ones. And so I think when you're thinking about which note taker is right for me, I think the general purpose ones are going to be at a much lower price point. Those ones are around, 15, $20 a month. And the AI for advisor note takers are going to be closer to maybe $100 a month. And I think what you're paying for and what the differentiator there is two things. One, it's an integration into your CRM. The note takers for advisors will integrate with Redtail, Wealthbox, Salesforce, all these things. So when they extract those summaries, those client emails, those tasks, those next steps, you just press a button and it fires right off to your CRM. And the second thing that they do a little bit differently is they actually kind of parse the output into things that are a little bit more meaningful for a financial advisor. So like the output of a, AI for advisor note taker will break it down into sections like financial planning updates, portfolio considerations, estate planning updates, whereas the general purpose will just kind of give you an all-encompassing summary. So if you're thinking about which one is for you, I think the price difference, what you're paying for is that kind of catered towards advisors output and the CRM integration. That being said, the general purpose note takers can go a very long way. And maybe could be somewhere where you can get started at like a little bit of a lower cost. There are other softwares that are starting to do kind of like AI for advisor type things. Again, most of them are note takers. And actually, sorry, backing up one step. One other thing I wanted to mention about the note takers is there's a lot of like venture capital flooding into the space right now and funding a lot of these startup companies that are building these note takers for advisors. And I think, like there's over 15 of them. I think in 2 or 3 years, there will be substantially fewer of them. And I think that the worst thing a firm can do right now is invest time, money, and data into an AI note taker that's not going to be around in a few years. So when you're evaluating these options, I wouldn't be looking at the product itself and the bells and whistles, and maybe this one does something a little cooler than the other one. I would encourage you guys to look at the business. Do they have a team? Have they raised a lot of money? How long have they been around? Do they have market share? Those are the things I would be looking at, because if you are, meeting with a founder of a note taker company, and believe me, I want to see them all succeed. But if you're meeting like with the founder of an AI note taker twice a week, and he's really trying to sell you, and he's promising to like build an integration for you, like his business is not scalable, and they're trying to figure it out. So just be like a little bit kind of cautious of that. So yeah, aside from note takers, there are other, AI for advisor technologies. Just to throw some out there, there's like a software, Virgil, which uses AI to extract data from documents. And it can also use AI to help you create and prepare documents. There's FP Alpha, which is uses AI to kind of read through really robust and lengthy estate planning and trust documents. And there's a few, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, softwares for advisors that use AI in the kind of prospecting process. So these are all things I would encourage you guys to kind of check out. But one area of caution that I will say is like, we all know like the advisor tech stack is already a mess. Like we're all using 10 to 15 different technologies, one for financial planning, one for tax planning, one for portfolio, one's for CRM. And because AI is so early, all these AI softwares are just solving for one use case right now. So I would encourage you to not be like, okay, I need the AI for meeting software. I need the AI for document software. I need the AI for prospecting software, because then you're just going to literally double the size of your tech stack. And I think these softwares will expand to kind of additional use cases over time. But I really think that if you just start signing up for the ones that just accomplish one thing, you're going to end up with a massive tech stack, which you don't want. And that kind of like leads me to what I wanted to talk about next, which is how do you kind of get AI involved in every part of your business, and allow it to kind of touch everything without necessarily needing to sign up for a ton of different AI for advisor software vendors. So I'll kind of pause here before we go to the next section. If Libby, if you have like any input or there's any questions.
Nope, you're on a roll. Keep going. I'm kind of consolidating some here. I mean, I'm doing my
Cool.
best I can to answer.
All right, let's keep it rolling. So something that I strongly believe in, that I think is perhaps a little bit of a different philosophy than some of the other, founders and people in this space that are working on AI for financial advisors, is that I think it's, going to be a foundational technology that touches every single part of your business. And because of that, I think firms should be building it into their business themselves. And I think, when you think about, like, let's compare it to the internet. When the internet first came out, it was maybe a financial advisor would use like the internet for one thing, but look at us now. You use the internet for absolutely everything. And I think AI is going to be the same way. We're going to use it for absolutely everything, and it will touch every part of your business and every process that you're working on. And so, how do you start infusing it into every part of your business if these tech providers out there are kind of just focused on very narrow use cases? And I think, the example or the answer is you start building it internally into your own processes and procedures and tech stack. And how the heck do you do that, right? That sounds like a huge endeavor. It's actually easier and cheaper than it's ever been. And there's a really interesting convergence of two different technologies right now, one being AI models and the other being no and low code platforms that allow you to build your own technology internally without having to write code or be a software expert. So Zapier is like the big one. There's a lot of firms already using Zapier. If you are, like, kudos to you. If you're not, go check it out. And there's some other ones as well. If you're at a big broker dealer that doesn't like external technology, cough, LPL, there's some like Microsoft Power Automate that live within the Microsoft ecosystem, you guys might have access to as part of Microsoft. But really what these technologies do is they allow you to build your own software and your own experiences for your business internally yourself. So a very simple, excuse me, a very simple example is like, okay, Redtail doesn't connect to MailChimp. I'm sure there's at least a few people on this call that just struck a nerve with them, but Redtail does not connect to MailChimp, and that's a big pain point for people. There's no integration that those two companies have built with each other. So what you can do in Zapier is link your Redtail account. You can link your MailChimp account. And without writing any code, you just set up these rules that say, okay, every time a new contact is added to Redtail, add that contact to MailChimp. And Zapier will just run in the background and continuously do that for you. And that's something that you set up in this like drag and drop interface. You don't need to write any code, and you can get it up and running in like 30 minutes. So that's kind of how, no code platforms work and what you can do with them. And where that gets really interesting is where you add AI in as a step in that process. So to give a more concrete example, let's say you want all of your Outlook emails to be added to the contact record in Redtail. You could build a Zapier flow that says each time I get an Outlook email, search the sender in Redtail, find their contact, and add the body of the email as a note. That's great. A way you could really enhance that is by adding an AI step in the middle where you say, okay, each time I get a client email, pass that email along to ChatGPT, have ChatGPT write a summary of the most key, like, important information that should actually be added to the CRM, then add that to Redtail. So now all of a sudden you have this kind of still very simple DIY workflow where you're using AI to kind of summarize, pull out the key details from your emails and get them added into Redtail. And so that's kind of how that works. And if you guys like follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I'm always saying, like, here's 50 ways we helped financial advisors use AI in their practice last year. And the way that we're able to do that is through exactly what I'm describing. There is no AI software vendor that's going to solve all of these use cases for you. And if there is, it's going to take a very long time for them to be built. And so I think, a lot of firms should really start thinking, how do we build this internally? And whether that's you learning how to use Zapier, take a quick weekend course. Maybe you have someone on your team who's really interested in that, and that could be a cool thing for them to do to kind of advance their career. Or if you even kind of want to outsource it and look for somebody to come in and help you, these things are quicker and much more affordable than they've ever been. And you can get these workflows stood up in, days for hundreds of dollars instead of, months for tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, that's kind of my thesis. DIY AI is something I think everybody should really be thinking about very, very strongly. I think we got a lot of messages.
Yeah. Okay. So DIY AI, I think you need to coin that or something. Trademark it. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's an AI to help you circumvent the trademarking process. Okay. So a bunch of questions here. One of the questions that I love is, do you have a list somewhere of best tech for advisors, kind of the most AI friendly or softwares that you recommend?
That's a great question. So, from a high level, in order to make AI and automation work for your firm, you need technologies that are integration friendly. And you need technologies that have what are called developer APIs, which basically means you can build your own integration into them. And so I do not have like a list on my website or anything of like the most integration friendly tech stack. I can say off the top of my head, like from a CRM perspective, you're looking at Wealthbox, Redtail, and Salesforce. Those all have phenomenal APIs that you can do a ton of work with. Something like an Advise-On, you have no way to get data in and out of there through a workflow automation. You can only do it manually. So that one's not going to work very well with automations. But I think, maybe as a follow-up, I can piece together that list of like my top technologies that I would recommend that play very nicely with workflow automations and doing your own integrations and AI workflows.
Okay, awesome. So Jason, who's in our group coaching program, he has a good question. He says, like, can Zapier do something like start and run an email drip campaign to new leads as they're entered into Redtail? Like, is it sophisticated enough to do that?
Yeah, Zapier can absolutely do that. Zapier can do like probably 90% of the things that you can think of. It's incredible tool. So yeah, and like what that would look like is you would just set up a trigger in Zapier that's always listening to Redtail. And every time that new contact or prospect is added, it would kick off that workflow. And then you would build a sequence of steps that say, okay, email them this email, pause for 3 days, email them this email, pause for 3 days, so on and so forth. So yeah, you could absolutely build something like that in Zapier.
Okay, awesome. So a bunch of like really specific questions. So like, have you figured out how to use Zapier with Exchange? Is that too specific?
Yeah, so Zapier integrates with Exchange, but depending on who, I suspect that somebody who wrote that is perhaps part of a larger broker dealer, depending on who um, your firm is and who is kind of has control of your exchange. A lot of times they don't allow Zapier to access the information. So Zapier does integrate with Exchange, but if you're having troubles figuring that out, it's likely because your firm has some restrictions in place.
Okay. What about, I mean, maybe you're going to get to this, but what about ChatGPT, all these other platforms? What about security considerations and compliance?
Absolutely, that's a huge one. So first and foremost, when you're using ChatGPT, you never want to put client PII into the model. That's just a blanket statement, probably goes without being said, but you should not be, uploading somebody's account statement into ChatGPT. And so when you set up these workflows and these things I'm talking about, we typically put a lot of things in place to strip out PII before we pass the data to the model, because AI doesn't need somebody's social security number or their account number. It just needs a qualitative context about what's going on. So no PII into the model. That's one best practice. Another one is when you're using ChatGPT, you can go into the settings and turn off what they call data retention. And what that is that means every time you talk with ChatGPT, they're storing your conversations and using that to retrain their models and make them better. But you as a user, you can turn that off. And from a compliance perspective, people don't want the data that you're putting into ChatGPT as a financial advisor sitting in OpenAI's database where they're going to retrain their models on it. So that's something you just want to turn off. Very easy to just go in settings and turn that off. And then lastly, I just think it's you just want to think really carefully about what you're doing with the output. Like, I don't think you should have ChatGPT drafting an email for you that you're just copying and pasting and sending and not looking at yourself. You absolutely need to have, kind of human in the loop. So yeah, I would say always like defer to your compliance people at your firm for like best practices, but those are some that we always say, no PII, turn off data retention, and just be very thoughtful about what you're actually doing with the output.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you for that. All right, let's keep moving.
Cool. So yeah, that was kind of like the meat of it, I guess. Just kind of this last section that I wanted to touch on quickly was just like some best practices for you guys for like getting started. So again, like I mentioned, if you use a note taker, if you're not already, if you are a firm owner, encourage your employees to use ChatGPT, but give them very strict guidelines on what they should and should not be doing, like I just mentioned. Make sure that they're not, putting PII into models. Just give them strict guidance on how they should be using ChatGPT so that you're kind of de-risking yourself. And also, maybe some people disagree with me, probably not anyone on this call, because everyone on this call wanted to learn about AI, but I would really kind of eh, discourage firms from just taking an outright banning of like you're not allowed to use chat gpt, because I think then what happens is people are just going to use it anyway, and they're going to use it without any sort of guidelines or best practices, and that's going to put you at a big risk. So embrace it, give people guidelines, set your employees up with clear ways to use it, and encourage experimentation. Just keep it open as a tab throughout the day, and the more you use it, the more you'll kind of learn from it and get better with it. So that's ChatGPT. In terms of like getting started, try out some of the AI for advisor softwares. Again, try out the note taker, try out some of those other ones I mentioned. And if you find that they fall short, explore, hey, is this something I could build myself in a Zapier or a Power Automate that's a little bit more tailored to me and kind of how I like it. Another thing before you get started building your own AI automations is data. So AI is only as good as the data that it has access to. And for most firms that we work with, we see that the central hub of data and the most effective kind of source of data to build all these automations on top of is typically the CRM. So if you're one of those people that just has a bunch of contacts in your CRM and all of the context about them is like up here in your head,
Mhm.
you need to start to get that into your CRM. The more information you have in your CRM, the more context you have about clients in your CRM, the better AI and the more effective AI experiences are that you can build. And you can actually use automations to add data to your CRM, which is another interesting thing. It kind of turns into this flywheel. Like what I mentioned before, you could set up an automation that says, okay, every time I get an email from a client, add a summary of that into Redtail. And then, so now you have something that's continuously updating your CRM, filling it with really good information. And then maybe you set up another automation that says, when that client books a meeting, get all their information from Redtail and draft up a meeting prep sheet for me. That meeting prep sheet is going to be so much better with all that data that other automation added. So it's kind of turns into this flywheel. But yeah, so all that to say, like, get data in there. If you're not doing it manually, automate it. And that's going to set you up for success. And then lastly, I think when you're thinking about like, okay, what do I want to tackle? Where do I want to implement AI and automation into my business? Probably a lot of ideas that come to mind. There's always opportunities in prospecting, onboarding, meetings, deliverables, scheduling, like all of these things you can use AI and automation to make them better. But I think you really want to kind of quantify or really try to think about what are the quick wins? Like, what's something that I know is a huge pain point that could be relatively easy to solve, and I can get up and running quickly. That's going to be, the way you want to approach it. Start with these quick wins, knock out these little things like, I hate copying and pasting data from this to that. Start with those quick wins and then move to those bigger bets where maybe it's like, I don't like my AI note taker. I want to build an end-to-end custom AI note taker in Zapier, which yes, you can do that, but it's pretty complex. So yeah, that would be my last piece of advice is think about the quick wins, move to the bigger bets. And yeah, if you guys are ever curious about like, hey, here's my big pain points, but I don't know what the technical lift is to actually solve these. Happy to, give my input. You guys can run those by me, and I could tell you very easily because I've done a lot of these. Like, hey, that's a big project, that's a small project, kind of so on and so
Okay, awesome. Okay, so with like Redtail, Wealthbox, things that have a lot of PII in it, are you able to give ChatGPT or other AI tools access to the non-PII parts of it? Like, are you able to pick and choose what parts it has access to?
Yeah, for sure. So Redtail, Wealthbox, and Salesforce, and all these big name CRMs have very good APIs, which means you can be very selective about the data that you pull out. So going back to that meeting preparation example that I was talking about, if you want to have AI draft up a prep sheet for you heading into a client meeting, you can tell that workflow only pull this, and that from Redtail. It's not like you have to suck all of that information out and then have the model just parse through what's important. So yeah, you can absolutely be very selective about what data is pulled out and make sure that you're only pulling out data that doesn't have that PII. And in the case that you are, you'll want to put something in that strips that PII out before it goes out to the model. That's kind of complex, but there are things you can do there where like you can have Zapier detect a social security number, an account number, strip that out, send the information to OpenAI, get the response, and then add it back in. You can also anonymize. You could swap out first and last names with Jane and John Doe, and then map those back after the AI response. So there's a lot of workarounds, but yeah, to answer the question, you can and should be very selective about what data it's pulling out of the CRM.
All right, that last one was swapping and in and out. People like I just saw like a collective eye glaze going left to right across the screen. So what would be some examples of like easy zaps that we could create with Zapier? So like for those of us that are like me, which is I'm like an 87-year-old woman trapped in a 42-year-old body who's like, wait, back up. Give me a couple like easy, like real simple zaps that we could start off with that like literally anybody could create on their own.
Yeah, so some really easy ones that don't involve any AI at all are scheduling. So client books a meeting on Calendly, you can set up a Zap that listens to that and then adds that meeting to your Wealthbox calendar. And I think for those of you that use those technologies, you might know that a lot of times when you have a Calendly event that goes to your Google Calendar or whatever, and then that goes to your Wealthbox calendar, it doesn't link the contact, which is like a huge pain point. But that's something you could solve in Zapier. So if that's you, I'm assuming that's a big percentage of you. Try building an automation that just says every time I get a Calendly booking, um, add that to my Wealthbox calendar, search for that email address in Wealthbox, and link the contact to the meeting. I think another one that I mentioned that actually is fairly simple that does involve a little bit of AI is the email notes one. So every time you set up a workflow that triggers every time you get an email, and then have it say, okay, first of all, is this a client in your CRM? You can add that as step 2, check to see if the sender is a client. If they're not, the workflow just ends, and that's easy to set up. If they are, have it grab their information from the CRM and then have it dump all of that into the AI model and basically tell it, hey, like you're a CRM data entry assistant. Based on this email, what should I be adding to my CRM? Please reply with just that. And then the next step from there would be taking that output and adding it to the CRM. I promise you, this sounds complex. It's not at all. You just kind of drag and drop these things on the screen and you just kind of build it out as a sequence. So those are a couple, I think, quick and easy ones.
Yeah. So, okay. So for my broker dealer peeps listening, so my Thrivents, my Edward Joneses, the people who don't control their tech stack, there's people saying like, okay, well, like, Are we able to use AI? And, obviously, like I talk all the time about there's a gazillion ways to use AI in your business that don't even touch your existing tech. Like there's a million ways to use it just to craft so many things inside of your business, SOPs. I mean, like literally so many things. But um, best practices for those people, like, are they able to do any of these integrations or is it all going to be blocked by compliance?
Yeah, so I don't know specifically firm by firm. I would say if ask your firm if you can use Zapier. I'm assuming for a lot of you guys, the answer might be no. But ask about Microsoft Power Automate because that lives within the Microsoft ecosystem and it is part of O365. And you can build a lot of these things that I'm describing in Microsoft Power Automate. So if you're at a bigger firm that's a little resistant to external technologies, but you're already on Microsoft, they might be totally fine with you using Power Automate. Or perhaps you can make the case for them to allow it because again, it's in the Microsoft ecosystem, which already passes all of their kind of security checks anyway. And then, yeah, also like ChatGPT, there's a lot of ways you can use it where it doesn't integrate with your technologies, just kind of as a brainstorming tool or a way to search the web, right? Like that's not, something that's going to be touching your technology or necessarily not allowed.
Yeah. So, and even if we're with a broker dealer, even if you're not using it to do all the super cool stuff, I know the first time like Ben and I talked, I remember getting off the phone being like, I literally paid people six figures worth of income to do all of these things. Like when he and I first were talking, that's where I was like, oh, this is Terminator type stuff, right? Because he's like, oh, and then you can have it go in and read your email and prep the, client file, and then it can create meeting notes and it'll generate the follow up. And it was like, I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, I was spending so much money and there's human error and time and sick days and holidays and, drama and other things that come along with people. Um, and it was crazy the amount of stuff that he was talking about. And I remember then having that like moment going, and there was no way that Thrivent was going to let me do literally any of that. But, the more that we've communicated and the more I've learned from Ben and the more that I've learned, taking AI courses and doing all of this stuff on my own, is there's a gazillion ways to use ChatGPT, Perplexity, et cetera, in your business, even if it's not workflows and taking tasks and doing some of that like super sexy kind of stuff. So still become a student of it, still learn it, still get really, really good at it. And then and push on your broker dealers, they're going to have to start integrating this, or we're already seeing like this mass exodus of people leaving BDs. And that's only going to exasperate that if they don't get kind of on board. And speaking of mentioning Perplexity, Gemini, et cetera, Ben, what besides ChatGPT, what other Perplexity, Gemini, Grok, are they all kind of the same or are there stark differences?
They're all the same. You'll see them brag about one scoring 2% better on some weird scoring exam that they give them. But for us in our day-to-day, you're not going to notice a difference between any of them. They're all starting to really converge. So I think it's just, whichever one you feel most comfortable using, whichever one you like the best. I use ChatGPT more than anything else. I use Claude sometimes, but I don't really think that it doesn't really strike me as anything meaningfully different or better.
Okay, and then
But
this one,
I will say with that, OpenAI has some crazy stuff that they just released like recently that's coming in the next few months. That's a whole rabbit hole. Maybe we don't get down that for now, but look out for that.
yeah, yeah, I saw some of that stuff about agents just here recently, and I was like, "Ooh, that's it. That is interesting." Okay, so this one I'm not sure if it's in English, but are there any solutions that you are aware of, self-hosted LLMs to allay the issues of client data sensitivity and third-party control?
Yeah. So
Glad that means something to
what
you.
this question is asking for some non-tech folks who don't know what self-hosted means. What that what this means is all these things I'm describing, you're sending your data to OpenAI and then they're sending data back. And you can ask them to not store it, but the reality is you're still sending data to them and it's sending it back to you. There are ways where you can build a large language model that lives on your own servers and doesn't communicate with any other external technologies. It lives on your firm's servers and is run locally on your entire infrastructure, and it doesn't communicate with the outside world at all. In order to do that, you need to use what's called an open source model, like some of these chatbots that Facebook has built. They've built like a really good one. So yes, to answer your question, yes, you can have a chatbot, something as good as ChatGPT, running on your computer that isn't connected to the internet. It doesn't talk to anything else, and it does all these things for you. That is a very large technical implementation. That is probably at least a six-figure project. So yes, it's possible, but unless you're like an enterprise firm, that's probably just overkill for a lot of you. So
Okay, so a couple more questions. So going back to Zapier, can it read red tail notes uploaded from an AI note taker and then create follow-up activities or tasks and put them on the calendar?
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
great. Okay. I figured that's what you'd say.
Are you
Okay,
serious? That's amazing.
mind blowing. Isn't it
I'm telling you,
unbelievable?
I'm telling you, Jason, like hop on a call. I'll set that up. You can share your screen and we can set that up in like 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm like my mouth on the floor.
I told you. I know.
I know. I know.
It's so good. Okay, so let's see here. Microsoft Power Automate, is it similar or different to Microsoft Copilot? What are the differences?
Okay, so those are two different things. So kind of think about how I talked about Zapier is like a way to connect your systems and build automations. And then OpenAI is the AI model that you can use in Zapier. Microsoft Power Automate is Microsoft's version of Zapier. So it's a way to connect your Outlook, your calendar, your Teams, and all that, and build automations. Copilot is Microsoft's version of ChatGPT. So you can actually build the same thing in the Microsoft stack using both of those. So you could build a Power Automate flow that says, hey, when I get a new Outlook email, have AI read and add it to a certain folder in my inbox based on what it's about. And you could do that with Copilot, which is Microsoft's AI model. So then you're building your whole automation and AI workflow entirely within the Microsoft suite. So yeah, Power Automate and Copilot are two different things. One is an automation platform. One is a chatbot. Both are built by Microsoft.
Okay, so Ava wants to know, what's your opinion on the difference between ChatGPT models for advisors? Any thoughts on creating your own GPT versus 4001, etc.?
Yeah, so 4.0 is going to be the best model for the majority of use cases. If you're just asking it to browse the web or kind of write something for you, O1 is what is called a reasoning model, where when you ask, in very simple terms, when you ask like 4.0 a question, it's like, okay, how can I just answer this as best as I can, as quick as I can? When you ask O1 a question, it's going to pause and say, okay, what are the steps that I need to take in order to best answer this question? And the model is going to think for like 20 seconds before it answers your question. And so that is best for like loaded questions. Like if you're like, hey, I need you to do market research on X, Y, and Z funds and create a comparison for me that compares, the internal fees of them, and then also draft like a email newsletter that highlights the difference in these fees, and then also tell me a joke at the end, and then also do this. If you want all that in one run, use O1 because it'll think through that and kind of do those things like one at a time and then give you an output. So yeah, I hope that answers
Yeah,
your
I feel
question.
like there was a deep-seated life lesson in there that like when you're asking a really big question to pause before you answer it. Like I feel like AI just taught me something there. Well, I appreciate we're at time. We still have a few more questions. I'm willing to hang out. Ben, I don't know if you have a few more minutes, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we're a little bit past the top of the hour for anyone who needs to jump off. Um, let's see if there's anything else in here. An AI cookbook. Oh my goodness gracious. So many things. Why don't I just open up the floor? Ben, do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, of course.
All right. If you have a question, why don't you just unmute yourself and ask away? We're letting it all rip here at the end of it. It's 5 p.m. in Eastern Standard Time. So time to just let it go.
Where can we do the recording?
I will send out a link here in the next however many days. Once it takes us to get the link down, we'll load it up into YouTube. I'll send that out here in a couple of days so that you guys can have that. And
Great.
I'll send you the chat so that you can see what questions were being asked, if there was anything that you wanted to put together for us,
Okay.
or any additional information that you think would be helpful for people. What else do you guys have?
Ben, I have one. First, Ben and Libby, thank you for putting this together. This was awesome. And question for you, Ben. So in terms of Microsoft Power Automate, does it essentially function the same as Zapier, but just inside the Microsoft ecosystem? So that's why you said compliance might be okay with it?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great questions. Anything else?
I would share a comment if you can hear me.
We can.
So just like our clients are also using AI, whether they know it or not, and that's in their Google searches. Google search results have gone from being, the top websites 1, 2, 3, 4 to now Google serves up the first answer is their own AI giving answers. And I'm astonished at how often it's wrong and giving our clients terrible information. So that's, it's worth talking about with our clients in meetings that, they're exposing themselves to permanent financial mistakes by, the DIY approach to just Googling things sometimes. And it's probably even more prevalent now.
Yeah, that's an interesting call out. And I think it kind of, hits on the theme that, you never, for now, take most things with a grain of salt. I will say that the AI generated summary that pops up at the top of a Google search is notoriously bad. And Google is getting like a lot of flack for that in the tech community because everyone's like, hey, you're Google and like this thing kind of sucks. So I don't think that will be that way forever. But yeah, that is a good call out.
Yeah. Well, and really, like, how different is it from before? I mean, I could Google something previously and get some crazy stuff out there. So if it's on the internet.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Well, a couple other just kind of simple use cases for those who are like Zaps and Connects and all these things like that. I'll just call Ben for. That makes tons of sense. Rachel, who is actually on this call today, she and I were just chatting the other day, and she was like, I want to craft a workshop for clients about X, Y, and Z. And we went ahead and shared screen and got on ChatGPT and we're like, hey, I'm a financial advisor. I want to craft a webinar on, it was about password safety for my clients, like what would be a great outline. And it gave us an outline. We're like, what are some good anecdotal stories that I could share? And give examples of different ways and it just was like, boom, boom, boom. And I just watched Rachel's face go, like, you just saved me hours and hours. So I want to encourage anybody listening who maybe if you are with a broker dealer or you aren't like super techie and that stuff's like kind of weirding you out, start small and start looking at ways that you can use it outside of your tech stack even to make your day-to-day, the things that you're spending time on so much faster and just getting really good at asking it questions, becoming BFFs with your chat GPT, like responding and saying, hey, that's really great. And can you add this? Or can you tell me more? Like letting it know like it's doing a good job and I want you to do the same thing, but now flesh that out. Give me some examples, craft a script for me for this webinar. Give me some example, search the web and tell me what are some of the absolute best past, word management protection softwares. Like what are the pros? What are the cons? It can do so much work. And like I mentioned, a client calls and says, I've been watching this guy on YouTube. And you're like, who is this Yahoo? I don't want to watch 6 hours of his YouTube videos. Tell me what this guy's perceptions are. For social media, something else that like I didn't realize is that you can tell it to think like a certain person. So you can say, I really admire Justin Welsh and his social media strategy style. Can you craft a bunch of posts for me using his framework? And it'll go in and it'll pull all the information and craft that stuff based on a certain style. So story brand, Donald Miller, you can say, here's my why story. Can you now run this through the story brand framework and craft and recraft it for me? I mean, it is unbelievable what you can use it for, not even including it. Like, I mean, the stuff Ben's talking about is like, but even just in your day-to-day, making what your team is doing and what you are doing so much more efficient and so much more effective. So thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate it. I will get Andrew's, that's one of my favorite quotes. I say that to my kids all the time, just because it's everything on the internet is true, says Abraham Lincoln. I'm pretty sure he said that. So thank you guys so much for being here. I will get the replay available. Reach out to Ben if you guys have any AI questions. He is literally the guy. And you know me, I love people who have been there, done that. Having that advisor background, I think, is so incredibly helpful. And the work that I have seen him do for advisors that I work with is just exceptional. So thank you guys for your time today. I hope this was time well spent. I hope you learned something new. And stay tuned. We're going to keep doing some more of this stuff. I'm going to try to keep offering some of these like special events, just kind of, again, no agenda, just super informational. And I appreciate you guys. And thanks again. I don't know if you saw, but our podcast was rated by Kitsis as one of the best podcasts for financial advisors. And I couldn't do that without you guys listening and opening the emails and paying attention on social media. So thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.